This gospel, well, it's long. You just stood through the reading of it. It is so dense and there is so much in it, it's hard to know where to begin. But I'm going to go back to the first chapter of John and remind us about the primary purpose of this gospel. The Word became flesh and lived among us. Jesus was the Word made flesh, fully human and fully divine. The second person of the Trinity became a human being and assumed flesh, the incarnation. Jesus was one divine person with both human and divine nature. And in this story, both natures of Jesus are demonstrated very clearly. I mean, his divinity is obvious when he raises Lazarus from the dead. But his humanity is on full display too. And sometimes I think that we overlook the reality that Jesus was fully human, experiencing the full range of human emotion, close relationships, and life events that are part and parcel of what it means to be human. So today I want to consider Jesus' human nature with you. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus are friends of Jesus who live in Bethany. And the depth of Jesus' love for these three siblings is made obvious by the way this story is told. They have a deep, intimate connection with each other. And when the sisters send for Jesus, he does come, but he arrives after Lazarus has died. And both Mary and Martha say to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." One of the questions on the sermon notes form that the confirmation students are asked to answer is, what question do you have for God this week? And I'm just going to say they ask some really deep questions. In fact, many of the questions that they ask are the same questions that we struggle with every day. And I would say that one of the most frequent responses is, why do people have to die? I think I can say with certainty that all of us, at one point or another, have had to endure the death of a family member or a close friend. I mean, even the death of a beloved pet can leave us reeling and off balance. Sometimes the death may have come after a long illness. Sometimes it's sudden, unexpected events, an accident of one kind or another. And in reality, the circumstances don't matter. Knowing and understanding the details surrounding a death doesn't change the reality that someone you love has died and that they will physically be absent from your life. Anyone who's been at the bedside of someone who is dying, has attended a funeral, or sat and held the hand of a friend who is grieving knows how absolutely helpless you feel. There's absolutely nothing you can do to change the finality of death. And in those moments, my guess is that all of us have asked God in one way or another, why do people have to die? In essence, this is the question embedded in Mary and Martha's statement to Jesus. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Like Mary and Martha, we want to know why in the world God doesn't intervene and keep those we love from dying, to spare us from the grief that sometimes, quite frankly, feels like it is going to overtake us. Because of our own experiences, we can imagine what Martha and Mary are going through. Their brother Lazarus has died, and they are deep in grief. They are weeping along with the people who came to console them there. And when Jesus sees them weeping, he becomes greatly disturbed in spirit and is deeply moved. And when they all go to see the tomb where Lazarus has been laid, Jesus responds as any person might. He begins to weep. Let's imagine what it is that Jesus is crying about in this moment. I think that it would be, again, pretty safe to assume that he is weeping because he feels the weight of grief at the death of his close friend. He feels deep compassion for his dear friends Mary and Martha when he sees them deep in their sorrow and their tears. But is it possible that Jesus is crying for himself? He knows what lies ahead and what has to be. To what extent in this moment is Jesus being asked to face his own mortality? He knows that in the coming days, Mary's going to anoint his feet as an expression of love. He knows that he is going to Jerusalem, and Lazarus will be present there with him. And those who witnessed Lazarus' resurrection will be there calling to Jesus. Those who heard about this sign will also be wanting to meet Jesus. And he knows that when the Pharisees see the reaction of the crowds to him, that they are going to seek to kill him. Yes, he knows that he will be raised, but in this moment, he's feeling the weight of grief that death brings with it. Jesus is crying for what he's experiencing in that moment, grief over the loss of his friend and the pain it has caused Mary and Martha. And he's crying for what is to come, his own death. Jesus is the Word made flesh, fully human, fully divine. And in this passage, it seems that Jesus' divinity and humanity just collide. Is it possible that he is also weeping because he cannot take death and the pain it brings away? I mean, death is a part of being a human because we are flesh and blood and bone. That's what it means to be incarnate, to have bodily form. And Jesus is incarnate. He is fully human, and he will also suffer death. I think Jesus weeps because of what death does and what it takes away. And I think Jesus' tears are for all of us too. When we experience pain and loss and grief, Jesus knows what that feels like because he has experienced it too. Jesus sees our pain and has compassion and weeps with us. Jesus can't take away our pain and our grief and our loss, but he is present with us in the midst of it. There's something deeply comforting in knowing that Jesus weeps with us, that we are not alone. And that can give us hope and strength for the future. As followers of Christ, we know that death is not the end of the story. That doesn't mean that our experiences with death are any less painful, but we are able to look ahead with expectation and hope. We may feel the weight of death and grief, but we wait in anticipation for Jesus to come out of the tomb and transform death into life. Hang in there. Easter's coming, and it will usher in abundant life with Jesus and God.